For nearly 20 years I have explored the Dinorwic Slate Quarry, which has now become a World Heritage Site. I have photographed every corner of this quarry throughout the years and made 2 documentaries, one which would win 2 film awards. This has become my favourite photography location, as there is always something new to discover. A few years ago I filmed an interview with Charles Duff, who was the adopted son of the Ashton Smiths, who were the quarry owners, and I've never had a chance to place that interview in any documentary until now. This is a story of the quarry from different eyes. Myself as the photographer, Charles Duff from the family of the quarry owners, and Mel Jones, who worked at the quarry during the 1950s.
How my family came to own Vaynol is really a bit of a mystery, because the family legend is that Vaynol was given by Queen Anne to an ancestor of my father, Michael Duff, in return for political favours. But in Kate Weathersby Lynch's book, it seems that this was completely untrue, that when the Williams family, who were completely mad hooligans, I think, when they died out, the crown, the land was left to the crown. It became the property of the king. And nobody seems to have known what to do with it. And I think actually that my family, who in those days were called Smith, bought the land, and they bought the estate. I suspect they'd made a lot of money as merchants in London. And I suspect one of the reasons that they bought an estate in North Wales was that they heard that there was slate on the land, and they thought that that could be utilised and could be developed. I think that must have been one of the reasons why they bought the land in the first place. This would have been in the very early 18th century, sort of the 1700s. So I think probably the family came to own the estate by actually paying hard cash for it. I don't think it was a gift from the crown, as we rather like to think that it was.
From November to March, winter in the quarry can be a cold, harsh place, but it offers moody and atmospheric conditions, such as rolling mist on the hills, dark moody clouds, and snow-covered mountains. The quarry can be a wet and windy location in the winter.
Ond nes i ddechrau gweithio yn mis Ebrill 1953. 6 wsnos gyn y Coronation. Dwi'n cofio'n iawn, a wedi gweithio 6 wsnos gysyn ni ddwrnod I ffwr am bod i y ddwrnod Coronation. Ac o'n i ddechrau na fatha rhyw rebelwr bach. Efo newydd o ysgadfa nes I ddechrau. A wedi bod yn rebela trio hollti, trio naddu. A mewn rhyw 8-10 wsnos o rwy'n wedi dod ffati o le wedyn oedden ni'n medru naddu cerig brasach nag oedden ni yn neud yn y dechrau un cerig man nhw. 19.4, 16, 18, 10 rhywbeth felly. Ond wedi dod yn pi bach o gamblar a meddwl bod ni'n llancia. Oedden ni'n cael mynd I naddu y farca, wedyn oedden ni'n naddu rhywbeth I lawr o Brynsis, I lawr I cerig man, dychis mawr, dychis bach, cerig dwbl 11, bob dim felly. Ac oedd hi'n galad iawn yn Rhosgadfan, o'n i'n byw ar y pryd. A wedyn oedd bus yn cwchwn o'r Rhosgadfan, 5:30 yn y bora. Codi bob dydd, rhywun dydyn bach o goni Rhosgadfan. Ac o'n had yn gweithio yn y chwaral fyd. Wedyn o'n i'n codi bob dydd, o'n i'n codi tua 5 o gloch y bora. A na letwydd I o peth cyntaf un I cael brecwas o llitho lloia am dar llefrith i'r lôn. Wedyn oedd y bus yn mynd 5:30 a to'n ddim yn gwytsiad am neb. Ac yn aml iawn amball un I colli'r bus y Rhosgadfan. A di neidio ei feic, a di ddod dros Allcoen Mawr a dros Cynant a'r bus yn godio yn Chryslo Marc yn Llanrug. A wedyn rhoid y beic yn y bus wrth adranol wrth gwrs de. A wedyn oedden ni'n cerdded naturiol o Gilfach ddu, bob cam I Bongs a Braich. Trwy Ffeir Injan a trwy Dyffryn ffordd I lawr I Bongs a Braich. Ond wedi eisiau adag yn y gia, bysys yn methu mynd i'r oedden ni'n cerdded o wylod all y foel, bob cam I Bongs a Braich. Os oedden ni'n medru gwneud ti, 10 o gloch yn y bora, oedden ni'n cael yn talu trwy'r dydd, ond os oedden ni'n methu a bus yn toi a pawb mynd adra, oedden ni'n dim tal o gwbl. Wel, oedden ni'n trafilio yn yr hefysbar oedden ni'n ddechrau o'r Rhosgadfan a cael hwyl a tynnu coes, amball I fawr ac wedi cael itching powder, a wedi rhoi o ar wddw rwy'n arall a hwnnw'n crafu. Ac o'na un gymeriad efo ni, mae ddod I marw fyd. Oedd yn goalkeeper o dam na dwi'n pawb yn gofio, Hugh Vernon. Ac oedd o foi am big pocket. A fydda Hugh yn trio stwffio hyd y bus a siarad efo hwnna llall. A di cwchwn o Rall Lu yn Dinorwic. A cyrraedd tia bydda ni ti cael athro fydda Hugh mynd I ben mlaen y bus. A mynd I bwcad, pwbia hwn, baca cigaret, box matches, cetyn, spectol. Oedd hi'n hwyl o'r Hugh, o pawb yn cael bob dim yn ôl. A fydda ni'n treu watchad o, ond sydd, oedden ni'n methu bob tro, fydda Hugh saff o gael rhywbeth o bwcad. Oedd hi, ac amball I fora, oedden ni lyb socian cyn cyrraedd Bongs a Braich. A wedyn oedden ni hongian yn cotia yn y caban a trio gobeithio sa'n nhw wedi sychu ebyn y nos. Ac o Bongs a Braich, dwi'n meddwl bod a rhyw 108 o fyrddau llifio nhw. Ac o un pen i'r shed i'r llall. O gach chi'n syniad pan o'n pen draw yna ormod o lwch, y bod na beth a tynnu llwch, ond oedden nhw'n gweithio ddigon da de. Ac o bob dim o'n amperianna, o bob dim yn cael ei wneud trwy ddilo mewn ffordd. Y fi yn hun yn bersonol o'na'n amball I shed. Beiriant I naddu, ond o'na ddim yn Bongs a Braich. A fedra I neis I roed naddu efo peiriant, dim ond efo cyllall bach. A felly neis I ddysgu. A fi si yn y shed, dwi'n siŵr am ryw flwyddyn a hannar. A ges i'n symud beth y fargan yn sâl yn Bonghiliwr. A mi ges i'n symud I fargan yn Bengarat. Efo 3 o gymeriadau, mae'r 3 wedi marw erbyn hyn. William Edward o Rhosgadfan, Johnny Morris, Myrddin Cynant, a Jack Hidwal, Gruffydd Awen Mawr, pawb yn abod o fel Jack Hid. A wedi bod efo Jack am ryw hanner blwyddyn. Mi ath un o hogia yn sâl a mi ges i'n symud i'r twll at Johnny ac ymanon nes I weithio a dysgu ar y craig ar ôl dysgu bio rhaid yn Bongs a Braich yn y shed. 60au cannar yn tua 60-61. Mi gysio ni doiles o fanno a dŵr a bethau felly, a dŵr cynnas i wrchu'n dilo, ond o hynny yn well o lawar, a ches i fawr o profiad hwnnw, a mae chysgwm bod fi wedi bod o'n am rhyw 19 mis wedyn. Ac oedd y gofalwr y caban, oedd o'n rhoi bwyd i radar, oedd yna robin goch yno, a fydda robin dod i fewn i'r caban a hogian llicho briwsion y lawr iddo fo. Ond oedd gofalwr y caban yn rhoi briwsion ar ei law fel a fydda robin yn disgyn ar ei law o, a dim ond ar ei law o, all cael neb arall. Ond ar ein o'n torri gwalltia, dwi'n cofio cyn ni brodi, 6 uniog o'n torri gwall o. A sesw gwm y glod y barbar. A wedyn, o'n i'n priodi wan y mis Ionawr, 1960, a wedyn yna stŵr fawr a tynnu coes a hwyl toi. A mae fi'n deud wrth ses, dwi eisiau torri'n wall cyn mi brodi di sadwn. O reit, ydi fama boi, a torri'n wall yma. Dyna o gyd i hwnna fod efo am bresan prodas a torri'n wall ar niw.
When I was a child, we used to go up from Ifeninelli, which was Port Dinorwic to us, and we would go up on the old funicular railway, where in the carts where the slates were brought down from Llanberis down to the docks to be shipped all over the world, and we'd go up on one narrow gauge railway, and then we'd change trains and go on to a second narrow gauge railway, which was steam, and used to go along the lake at Llanberis and would go to the quarries. And I suppose during the 1950s I went a few times, and it was wonderfully exciting because the quarries were still in full operation then. Later on, when things weren't going so well, because of the problems that we had at home, really, as a family, for whatever reasons, my father didn't particularly like us. I don't quite know why that was. It was quite often I asked whether I could go to the quarries, and for whatever reason it didn't happen. And by the time I went to the quarries again, it would have been after 1970, and everything was really sort of not working and not in operation anymore. But I do remember the quarries working, yes.
Spring arrives from March until May. Springtime in the quarry can offer some nice misty mornings. Rolling clouds with the sun breaking through, casting beautiful light onto the quarry hills. Colours start to emerge, such as the greens and the purple from the bracken. The days get longer and make exploring the quarry much more enjoyable in the warm spring air.
rhedeg digon drwg am waith yma'n neud 53. Ond un byd ond y chwareli mynd bron iawn. A dwi'n cofio nawr mynd am gyfeiliad i'r offis fawr yn Gilfach ddi. A'r rheolwr yda cynnig enw Richard Jones. A wedi cael y cyfeiliad mae cael yn gyrru Llanberis ac ar ryw fedi cael adbod yn ôl yma. Mae'n dweud, na chi yn was i meddwl da chi waith am eich oes. A mi chynnig am y mywyd. Meddwl bod eisiau mi ffasiwn le a hyd yn oes. Ond o'n i falch iawn o gael o gwaith hefyd bod y cyflog 2 bunt swll a 9 o am wsnos. Ac oedd y bus o'r Osgadfan yn costio coron i ni. 25 pence i ddod yn meddwl yn yr arian hydw, de. A o'na ddim byd yno, o'na am llefydd iolchi dilo, o'na ddim byd. O'na ni'n golchi dilo dan dap o'na chedag 2 o'r tymenydd a rhyw beipan bach dod allan. O dim oes pa byd oedd y tywydd, gia neu ha, o dan y tap dŵr o'r yma. Oedda ni yn golchi'n dilo. Ac yn rhaw sydd pyn bach yn boeth o llechi'n tynnu gres. O'r hen chwarelwr yn deud ni pidiwch hafad gormod o'r dŵr na. Ne mi gewch chi golyg ac oedd nhw'n berffaith iawn. Oedd y dŵr mor oer sa chi'n i yfad o ryw 2 gypanad ar ôl y llall. Oedda chi'n cael y poena mynd o'n nadwy yn eich stumog.
There was a terrible amount of dishonesty, I think, and casuistry that certainly the managers, the people who were managing the quarry on behalf of the family that lived at Vaynol, were actually putting it forward, weren't they, that it was a healthy way of life and that there was no danger from slate dust and there was no danger from disease. And so I think it was pretty horrific, really. I think the conditions were very bad. I think that if you had asked some of my father's ancestors at Vaynol what the conditions their quarrymen were in, they would have said that they did try to look after them. There was a great point always made that they were paid more than labourers on the land were paid, that the quarrymen were paid more than agricultural labourers, and I think so too. I mean, for the skill and the danger involved with working on the slate terraces. One of my father, in fact, the family were called Ashton Smith, and my father's great uncle inherited the estate because he was Thomas Ashton Smith, the last Thomas Ashton Smith's great nephew. And that Thomas Ashton Smith, I think, was a very high Tory paternalistic, had a very high Tory paternalistic view towards the people who worked for him, both in North Wales and in Hampshire. And I think that he thought that he was doing good for his quarrymen. He thought that he was doing the right thing by building them houses, by building them a school, by making sure that there was some sense of community. But as I say, I mean, it was all there really to make money for him, and a great deal of money was made. I mean, you know, owning a slate quarry right up, I think, until the 1930s was really like owning a gold mine, wasn't it? And the family became very rich.
From June until August, the summer arrives. A photographer's least favourite season. The days get even more longer. The skies are blue with less clouds, and the vegetation fills the land with a green lush colour. The quarry becomes a warm location as the slate absorbs the heat from the sun, and sinkholes dry out, leaving a mysterious landscape. As the rock faces become dry, they can display different shades of green, blues and grey on the slate rock face.
Wel, ella bod ni'n cael yn trin dipyn bach gwell dim llawer, oherwydd o undaf wedi wedi chwarae o byn hyn. Ac o na rhywfaint bach o fysol gynno ni fel chwarelwrs, ond ar y cyfan, oedden ni cadw'n byd, dim ond bydda ni yn ei wneud mewn cyflog a pethau felly. A dwi'n cofio'r ddwrnod ar y bonc yna, o'r hen Michael Duff, oedd un gofawr, oedd tua dros 6 troedfedd ymell, ac oedd o 6 troedfedd, 6 modfedd dwi'n meddwl. Ac ar y bonc mae yna un o hogia na yng Ngweinfio, ac oedd o golwg carpio gyda fo. A dyma, os yw'r maic yn dod rownd y bonc, yn ma'n deud wrth y stiwad gosod, by God, man efo, who's that man over there? A dyma'r stiwad gosod yn deud po oedd o. Well, send him a trousers up in a day or two, man o. A mi o'r rhyw ddau ddwrnod yn landio'n cabam, ben i gerad, dyma drowsus yr maic yn cyrraedd. Trodd y dyn yma rhyw 5 troedfedd, 7 modfedd oedd o, a chwyl awr tynnu'r trwsus o'r bag, a'i drio fo amdano, a dim ond gweld top i benno, di'r cael falog, de. O'r trwsus yn da i ddim, de gwaith. Ac wedyn oedd y stiwad gosod a'r gorychwiliwr a'r rheolwr, bob dolyg oedden nhw'n cael para o ffesant o'r Vaynol fatha. A nhw'n staff mewn ffordd, ond oedden ni yn cael dim byd, de. Oedden ni'n gweithio i'r awr ddwytha cyn dolyg a bethau felly. A dim ond dolyg oedden ni'n cael, a bocsyn, de. Dim yrmu mwy, de. A oedden ni'n cael fawr o dim byd o'i crwyno, oedden nhw'n cael mwy gynno ni, dwi'n meddwl.
Slate was not very cost effective, was it? Because slate's very durable and can be used over and over again. And there were all sorts of ruses dreamt up by Tom Williams, who was the manager of the slate quarries then, to try to make slate more attractive. I mean, I even had a slate jersey at one point. Slate tables were made, and they were designed slate tables which were on sale in smart shops in London. There were slate jerseys made up very sort of prickly, sort of rough, slate fibres. And they tried to diversify very much in the quarries without success. But they were going downhill. And they were relying, as you know, and as you've said in your documentary, very much on orders from France. And there was a very big order from France which fell through. And once that fell through, really, that was the end of the quarries. And they weren't going to be able to continue anymore. And this was when, in 1970, 1969, 1970. And that was really the end of the quarries. And a lot of people went out of work overnight. There was some re-employment through Ferodo's, the factory on the Caernarfon-Bangor road, which made brake linings, re-employed a certain amount of the quarry workers, no doubt in much better conditions than they'd been used to in the quarries. But certainly that was the end of the, and really I think the end of the slate industry in North Wales, wasn't it? It was... A lot of my upbringing was very privileged. They were also 2 people who should never have got married, and they were certainly 2 people who should never have had a child. They should never have adopted a child. And I think their intention to begin with was to be ordinary parents and to have a happy family, but they were both monumentally selfish. They were, and when 2 selfish people get together, they usually give each other a pretty hard time. And I think that they did give each other a pretty hard time. And therefore, the marriage was going wrong in quite early days, in quite early years. And, but it was, they were, I don't know what this, talking about the quarries, I don't quite know what my father, Michael Duff, thought. I think he tried. I mean, I think he would have liked to have thought that he cared for the people who worked for him. He would have hoped that they lived in good conditions and were happy. But the family itself, who the Ashton Smiths, who later on the Duffs, were not a very distinguished bunch, I would say. They were not people of much intellect. They were not people of very good education, even. They hadn't been very well educated. They hadn't served in the army. They hadn't contributed very much to the country, be that country Wales or Britain. And I think they were really, in many ways, just people who'd struck it lucky. They'd inherited an estate, and with the estate, through the slate quarries, a very large income. I don't think they were unpleasant people. I don't think, on the whole, they were unpleasant people, but they were certainly an example of the people being against the hereditary principle. I don't think that they were people of very great distinction. And I don't know, I suppose the attitude would have been, would it, that there was no employment up here in North Wales other than the quarries, be they the Penrhyn quarries, be they the Dinorwic quarries, and that what would happen to the men if they weren't quarrymen. So therefore they were providing the employment. They also thought, I think, don't forget that the actual management, the day-to-day running of the quarries wasn't done by the people at Vaynol. It was done by various quarry managers, the longest lasting of whom was a man called Walter Vivian, who was actually the brother-in-law of my great-grandfather, Charles Duff, Charles Ashton Smith, and he was the one who came in with all those ruses of putting various teams of quarrymen in competition against each other, and so therefore people only making money if they had cut more slate than other people, which seems to us pretty reprehensible, I have to say. But I think that he just thought it was a cost-effective way of getting the quarries operating, really. So I think that would have been their defence. And after all, people didn't question the social structure in those days quite in the way that they started to in the early 20th century. I think it was assumed that some people owned land, some people worked the land, as it were. And of course, in the case of Wales, it's of interest, isn't it, that so much of socialism, Welsh socialism, somebody actually standing up and saying all this is unfair, came from the miners in the south and came from the quarrymen in the north, and also I think came from nonconformism, doesn't it? It came from the chapel a great deal, people getting together as a community to sing, people getting together to worship, and somebody actually saying, you know, that conditions are not right, things are not fair. And so therefore changes were effected, I think, at about that time. And the quarrymen had something to do with it. Our family were never as unpopular as, let's say, Lord Penrhyn was at the Penrhyn quarries, which, as you know, the famous Penrhyn lockout in the 19th century didn't extend to the Dinorwic quarries. And I think to a degree it didn't extend because of the tact of George Duff, George Ashton Smith, who didn't antagonize the quarrymen and the representatives of the quarries quite in the way that other slate barons did. Both my parents were a glamorous couple, and they knew nearly everybody who moved around in the smart world of those years. And my father had a fixation about the royal family. He loved the royal family. They were his great hobby. They were his great interest. He particularly adored the Queen Mother. And in a mild way, I think this affection was reciprocated. When the royalty came to North Wales in those days, they were apt to stay at Vaynol. And a lot of fun and gaiety was had by all. My father had been the godson of Queen Mary, who was the consort of King George V. She was the one who wore those funny hats called toques on her head with rays, and had parasols. And he was famous for dressing up as his godmother. He used to dress up in drag as his godmother. And there was a story where he was at a grand house in England, and was dressed up as Queen Mary and was pretending to be Queen Mary, and suddenly a panic-stricken butler arrived and said that the real thing had come, and Queen Mary had arrived in her car, and my father had to rush upstairs and change into his own clothes and come downstairs again because the real Queen Mary had arrived and was having tea. It was all, I think we would call it, the atmosphere at Vaynol was very camp. I mean, it was very theatrical. There was a lot of dressing up. There was a lot of pretending. It was very superficial. I think that there wasn't a great deal of social conscience going on. Cecil Beaton, who was a very great photographer and stage designer, was a man of great astuteness and great intelligence. But I think a lot of the people who came to Vaynol weren't exactly the brain of Britain, shall I say. I was unaware of the rumours that I was meant to be the illegitimate son of Princess Margaret and Group Captain Peter Townsend until I was in my mid-50s. I'd never heard these rumours, and they came my way because a documentary for BBC Cymru was made by a lady called Dinorwic Slate, and she faced me with these rumours when the film was being made. And all I can say is that this is not so. I was adopted at the age of 10 weeks old by my parents, Michael and Caroline Duff, and my origins, I'm from an Anglo-Irish family, and my birth mother was an Anglo-Irish social therapist, she called herself, who had me in London. I was conceived in Dublin. I was born in London illegitimately, and I was adopted at the age of 10 weeks old. So I know I know about my family of origin, and indeed I am in contact with some of them at the moment. So no, unfortunately not. Some of my friends said I shouldn't have denied it. I should have tried to cash in on it and made a bit of money, but I'm not. No.
Autumn is a photographer's preferred season. The quarry colours change as the greens die out and the land turns to a coppery gold colour, offering great landscape images. Autumn can be the best season for mood and colour and offer all the different seasons at once. This is the golden period for any photographer at Dinorwic Quarry.
I come and stay with Victoria here, who's my cousin, and that's lovely because she's a divorcee, and I live by myself. But I had a lot of very bad times up here. I had a lot of very bad times at Vaynol, and there are difficulties now with my relations getting very old. You know, my relations on Anglesey are now very old and very decrepit. And I love it up here and I feel part of it. But I also feel separate from the people who live up here. And I think the big piece of why I feel so separate is that I don't speak Welsh. I think you can't claim, really, to be part of life in North Wales if you don't speak Welsh, can you? And I feel that the time that I spent up here was too much holiday time rather than really being part of the community and being part of the local people, knowing local people. So I wouldn't claim, I mean, I think I was once asked whether I felt Welsh. And although I'm very proud of having Welsh ancestors, I'd have to say that I don't really, because I don't feel that I've ever lived here for long enough or made my life up here. I mean, I was in the theatre, and now I'm an academic who teaches theatre. I teach theatre to students, to American students, and therefore my work's in London and America. But I do love it up here, there's no question about it. I wish I lived up here, but I don't.
Wel, dwi'n cofio'r bob bora dydd Llun yn Boncis a Braich pan i'n hogyn bach, wel, 15 oed o'n i. Oeddech chi'n mynd i'r caban yn bora, cael rhyw sidong bach cyn dechrau gweithio. Ond pan ad 9, oedden ni'n mynd at y byrda, sa fiw ni regi, o hogia ifanc. Tasan ni regi, sa ni'n cael yn herodd ar y bwr. A bu oedd yr hen chwelwrs yn siarad amdanyn nhw, o pregetha, y pregethws ma'n dweud bod pregethu mor wahanol gapelydd yn Deiniolan, Llanberis, Llarig, Bethal, chos Tryfan, chos Gadfan, fora, a Wein Fawr. Ac yn aml iawn yn gofyn, pwy'n pregethu gwsil dwytha, o hwn a hwn, bu oedd i destun o peth a peth, o dyna o'n pregethu'n Deiniolan, sy'n dwytha. Oedden nhw'n cofio'r cwbl, ond oedden nhw'n barchus iawn o bob dim. A chydig iawn o'n aregi ar y byrda, newedig pan ni'n cael bwyd. Oedden ni'n yfad fel law, mygiad tyn gyda bach hyn. Ac oedd hi'n hwyl fawr weithiau, choed hoelan trwy'r myg tyn. Oedd hi'n sawnd yn y bwr, a rwy'n yn mynd am banad neu amser cinio, doedd y myg i'n mynd, ond dyw a chelpo chi sa'ch chi'n cael dal wedi choed pethau lyn, sa'ch chi'n cael eich predi fel bob cawan yn bongs a breich dwi'n. Wel, yn y cyfnod fi si yn y chwaral, fi si no 1953 ta 1962. A cheswm dy eisiau ono, o'n i wedi priodi yn 1960. Ac o'n i wedi bod yn yr armi, o rhaid i wneud National Service. Fi sy'n yr armi o 1956 ta 1958, a mynd yn ôl i'r chwaral. A mi laddwyd 2 yno, i mi gweld nhw, ond dwi'n credu yn y cyfnod fi sy'n ei gyd bod a 5 neu 6 ydi lladd o, dwi'n mynd sicr iawn. Ond mi welis i 2, o un, wel y fi oedd mi droiodd y clwgwyn ar ei gem, no rwb oedd yna o. Ac o'n i'n un o hogia, oedd yn tyllu ac yn trio symud y pilars yma, i gael hyd i'r ein cadur, ond o golwg dychynllid o. A mi o ryw 2-3 mis wedyn, mi laddwyd un arall y bonc o danau. A dyma fi'n dod adra i fa mae'r oes Tryfan, a mae'n deud wrth Glenda Roeg, Creu Glenda, felly yn ymbyr i di nesaf, dwi'n mynd i chwilio am waith. A dyna'r rheswm nes i adael y chwaral yn 1962. Ac on, na dyna os a di digwydd i mi na fyd.
As we've gone through all the seasons, every season at the quarry can offer great opportunities for black and white pictures, especially high contrast images. This is the perfect location for black and white. So this is why Dinorwic Quarry to me is one of my favourite photography locations. It has too much to offer, and the compositions to be had can be endless. But most of all, the history of what the workforce had to endure should never be forgotten. I personally hope to continue exploring the quarry for many years to come.